This lesson is Midsegments of Triangles. The goal is to use properties of midsegments to solve problems, and the standard is congruence number 10. What you should get from this lesson is that there are two special relationships between a midsegment of a triangle and the third side of the triangle. The triangle midsegment theorem states that if a segment joins the midpoints of two sides of a triangle, then that segment is parallel to the third side and is half as long, or the third side is twice as long as the midsegment. Notice the tick marks. Each side is congruent, and each side over here is also congruent. That way I know that that red line is a midsegment. Z is the midpoint of Vy, and X is the midpoint of Wy. If VW equals 40, what is XZ? Now, if you remember, I said that the third side, or the bigger side, is always twice as big as the midsegment. So if I take 40 and divide it by 2, then I find that the length of XZ equals 20. Your practice problem 1 says Y is the midpoint of UX and V is the midpoint of UW. If WX equals 92, what is VY? Next problem. V is the midpoint of UW and X is the midpoint of WY. If Vx equals 38, what is Uy? Again, remember that the third side is twice as long as the shorter side. So I'm going to take 38 times 2, and I get 76. So Uy equals 76. Practice problem 2. Vx is a midsegment of triangle TUW. If Vx equals 14, what is TU? The next problem, R is the midpoint of QS, and U is the midpoint of QT. If ST equals Z and RU equals Z minus 11, what is the value of Z? Now I know that RU is the smaller one, and this is twice as big. So I need to take Z and set it equal to 2 times Z minus 11. Because Z minus 11 needs to be twice as big to be equal to Z. When I use the distributive property, I get 2Z minus 22. If I subtract 1Z from both sides, I get 0 equals Z minus 22. Add 22 to both sides, and find out 22 equals Z. Half of 22 is 11, so 22 minus 11 is 11, so I know that 22 is the correct answer for Z. Your practice problem 3, V is the midpoint of UW and T is the midpoint of UX. If WX equals X plus 17 and TV equals Z, what is the value of Z? Now remember, Z plus 17 is going to be twice as big as TV. Always multiply the smaller side times 2 to get your value of the variable. This next problem, H is the midpoint of GI and J is the midpoint of IK. If GK equals T plus 17 and HJ equals T minus 32, what is the value of T? Now remember, I said the larger size, or side, which is T plus 17, equals, and it's always going to be 2 times the length of the smaller one. So I'm going to put 2 times the quantity, T minus 32, since that's the smaller side. I have T plus 17. When I use the distributive property, I have 2T minus 64. I subtract T from both sides, and I get 17 equals T minus 64. Add 64 to both sides, and 81 equals T. Now I need to check that by going back to my original expressions, and I'm going to take 81 plus 17, that gives me 98, and on the short side I'm going to take T, which is 81, minus 32, which equals 49. Half of 98 is 49, so I know that T does equal 81. Practice 4, which you'll do the same way, says if JK equals Z plus 61 and GI equals negative Z plus 41, what is the value of Z? Just remember to make your smaller side times 2 to do the distributive property before you start solving for Z. Alright, where are you? Are you still at I don't get it? I hope not. If you are, watch the video again. I sort of get it. I got this, or I'm so good I can teach this. Hopefully you got this, and maybe some of you are so good you could teach this. Remember, we are looking for midsegments of triangles. And that is the end of this lesson.